Welcome to the 2013 Spring Flood Outlook for Northeast Montana, presented by the National Weather Service in Glasgow, Montana. Well, we've had some snowfall above normal for this season, but not anywhere as bad as what we had 2 years ago across the area. We did do some ground and aerial surveys in the last few weeks. The Weather Service employees went out across the Canadian border and across from Whitewater to Opime and towards Plentywood to take measurements. And we also had aerial surveys done with aircraft that helped validate what we were seeing on the ground and helped calibrate the models that we're using for how much moisture we can see in the soil this year. The green lines that you're seeing on this map are all of the aerial surveys that were done by aircraft. And again, our employees actually went out from north of Malta all the way across this northern tier to take snowfall measurements and snow water equivalent measurements. We did find some areas that had 3 to 4 inches of snow water equivalent in there. So some pretty good moisture in the snowpack that we have. This is the modeled snow depth. It does have taken into account the observations that we've had, but it also has our most recent storm from this past weekend that's showing up in here. The good news is a lot of this part of the country actually melted off last week when we had 50s and 60s for highs on 2 days. But then we've added in a little bit more snowpack again on top of it. But the area we're mostly concerned with for any real significant flooding at all would be north of the Milk River and then north of the Missouri River as well from this country. Southern Saskatchewan's had near record snowfall in some of its areas. The Milk River basin doesn't extend too far up in there, but again, there's been some moisture. So the Milk River and the Poplar and the Big Muddy are kind of our focus for any flooding that we're keeping an eye on this year. Taking a look at the 90-day observed precipitation for northeast Montana, you can see that we've had quite a bit, anywhere from 2 to 4 inches in some of the area for melted snow water equivalent. And if you look at the percent from normal, that's quite a bit above normal. We're anywhere from 150 to 300% above normal in these blue areas. So it has been a wetter winter across northeast Montana. The 30-day, if we look at the last 30 days from about the middle of February to the middle of March, again, still looking at some pretty good precipitation across northeast Montana with up to 2 inches in the dark green area. And if we look here, again, kind of a mecca of precipitation, we're still in that 150 to 400% above normal range for that 30-day period. So again, pretty good moisture for most of northeast Montana. You can see that the southern part of the state and southwest part of the state hasn't fared quite as well as we have here in the northeast. One of the things we are concerned about with snow melt is always what the mountain snowpack holds, and this isn't going to impact us in the next few weeks. This is something we keep an eye on for May and June time frame. But you can see here the only one above normal is the Milk River and St. Mary's Basin. We're at 113% of normal. All the other sites that lead into the Missouri River or into the Yellowstone River are below normal by 10 to 20% or right at normal. So again, not a whole lot of snowpack in the mountains, unfortunately, to help some of the rivers later into the summer. So the March outlook, we have been colder than normal for the last few weeks. That trend is expected to continue into early April, and then we might finally start to see that warm up. As far as precipitation goes, though, there's equal chances of above or below normal precipitation, which is good for us. If we had a bullseye of above normal precipitation, we'd be a little bit more concerned about some of these outlooks that we're going to give you here in a few more slides. The 3-month outlook for March, April, May, again, similar story, equal chances of above or below normal temperatures and precipitation. So really we're not looking at anything drastic one way or the other, but we have been wetter than normal. Maybe that trend will slightly continue into those spring months. So our first basin that we focus on in northeast Montana is the Musselshell River. Again, they're down south of Fort Peck Lake, and it's coming down from some of the mountains, and some of that area has already melted off. Some of the smaller tributaries have run through. We're not really concerned except for maybe some ice jamming because it's got a lot of kinks and curves in this river, and sometimes that ice gets caught up on those turns. So again, we're not expecting anything significant with it, and thankfully most of the smaller tributaries have melted off. The Poplar River, we're looking at this, everything's still frozen. This one here in the upper right is showing a little bit of movement. There's just some ice fluctuation going on there, but no drastic changes. We didn't, even with the warm up last week, didn't really penetrate along the Canadian border here. Just to the east of the site there is the east fork of the Poplar, and again, that temperatures did not penetrate. We don't see hardly any movement. It's frozen pretty solid. And the ice is going to be there for a while. As we go closer down towards the Missouri River, the Poplar River at Poplar, a little bit of a rise, but really nothing significant. Flood stage is 15.5 feet, and we barely got over 3 feet there. So again, we could see some ice jamming occurring on the Poplar River, but the river is really, even when it comes out of its banks, there's not really any property threats along it. Maybe some low water crossings and maybe some fields. We'll see some runoff from the snow melt across it, but we are not real concerned about anything major for the Poplar River. As we go to the east a little bit farther, the Big Muddy coming down from Reserve and down towards Medicine Lake and such. This river does have a tendency to have ice jams and some of the snow melt runoff. There is pretty good snowpack up in Sheridan County and also up into Canada. And so as that comes off, we could expect some overland flooding with some fields and such. The Big Muddy might come out of its banks a bit, but it doesn't generally cause too many problems, maybe a low water crossing or two. What's new with the Big Muddy this year is there is an automated gauge on Highway 2 where it crosses. And again, you can see it's pretty flat. Really, it's frozen in there. There's no movement on this right now, but we'll keep an eye out on that. The Yellowstone River at Glendive and Sydney is another story. You know, it's a big, giant river, and our big concern every year is the ice. Well, this photo in the upper left shows the ice is gone. This was on Monday morning. And if we look at the gauge at Glendive on Friday last week, we had all those warm temperatures on the upper end of the Yellowstone River. That ice moved out, and you can see here was the ice, and boom, ice dropped out, the river dropped. So Glendive is free and clear from the ice at this point. It is up between the Savage and Crane areas. There is some ice in there, but nothing that anybody is concerned about at this time. You can see Sydney has had a little bit of fluctuations in here, but no big rises or falls or drops or anything. So that ice hasn't quite come through Sydney yet. So the big thing we would watch for the Yellowstone right now is just some minor ice jams maybe occurring. We don't expect there to be any overland flooding with that ice like this picture shows from back in 2003. And the mountain snow melt, that's the next big rise for the Yellowstone, and when the flows really start coming heavier. And again, that's not usually until May or June. And with the snowpack not being so great this year, we don't expect anything extraordinary from that. Now, on to the Milk River. Most of the southern tributaries into the Milk have run last week with those nice warm temperatures we had. That's great. We've seen rises in the river, and it's coming back down, and we want to see that happen. We want to see it melt from south to north and west to east in a nice kind of orderly fashion to get that water out of here. You can see here at Dodson, you know, they started to go up last week on Thursday, kind of peaked out over the weekend and have been slowly falling since then. Again, we don't have any flooding concerns in the Dodson area. There's not a lot of snow upstream of this area that we have to worry about. Malta now has an automated gauge as well. You can see that they came up a little bit over the weekend, but still well below flood stage of 16 feet. So again, no concerns in Malta either. Those smaller creeks and tributaries coming in have run off, and not a whole lot left for them to melt, except from what we had from the recent storm, and that wasn't a whole lot this past weekend. Now, Beaver Creek, it really does have a large area it covers, coming across all of southern Phillips County and all the water out of the Little Rockies from the snowfall there. You can see that it did rise near Saco, but again, flood stage is 11 feet. It went to 4.3 feet over the weekend. Not a big deal. We could maybe see as we get some more of the snow coming through, or if we happen to have any bigger events, maybe with half an inch of rainfall, those kinds of things, we could probably see Beaver Creek coming up higher than that through the spring. But for right now, this is a good sign that the main runoff has come through. You can see Beaver Creek at Hinsdale peaked this past weekend as well and has been coming down. So the majority of the snowpack is gone. The only concern we would have is if we were to have a very large snowfall event or heavy precipitation in the next few months. This is looking at a forecast for Beaver Creek at Hinsdale. Kind of confusing to look at, but the blue line is all of the historical data that we would expect for the next 90 days. If we had this, all the climate data and all the hydro data, and we looked at it for the next 3 months, what could you expect? This is what the blue line is. Okay, the black line is looking at conditions for this year. So right now, the black line is showing we have about a 48% chance of hitting minor flooding at Beaver Creek at Hinsdale. So not a big deal. You know, minor flooding is just right at bank full or just starting to come over. There's a 24% chance that the water starts to flood the Milk River Road just north of the Beaver Creek Bridge. So a little smaller chance that we could hit moderate flooding, but again, we're not expecting anything like what we had 2 years ago. This graph on the bottom right is showing when those predictions would probably most likely occur climatologically and based off the current forecasts and climate data we have. And so you're seeing it's the last week in March, first week into April that we could probably most likely see that water coming down. At Saco, a little bit different of a reach in there. The water comes through a little differently, only a 6% chance of reaching minor flooding. Nothing we're really concerned about at that point. Tampico, again, you can see it ran pretty good over the past weekend and has been coming down. A little bit more concern here. We do have a 48% chance of reaching the flood stage of 23 feet and a 30% chance of reaching the moderate flood stage of 24 feet. So we're draining some other smaller coulees and some of the other areas coming in. You've got Rock Creek and Antelope Creek and Brazil Creek that come in just below Tampico. So there's a little bit more water coming into the Milk at this point, and not all of that has drained yet from the north side of the river. Time-wise, again, we're looking at maybe that second to third week in April for that water to come through. At Glasgow, we don't have an automated gauge here. These are manual observations we take. 12.87 feet is what we had just earlier this week. So the water had come up from where it was last week. Not a big concern. Flood stage is 25 feet. But what we are looking at is a 67% chance that we could be hitting the 25-foot flood stage. Not a lot happens there. At 26 feet, it does start to come out of its banks and starts to get some low-lying areas. Takes a little bit more to start impacting roads. At 28.5 feet, the Watley Road will have some water flowing across it. Good news is there's only an 8% chance that we'll reach moderate flooding, and we spent a lot of time 2 years ago in that moderate to major flood stage. So we're at the lower end, and that's a good thing for us. Again, time-wise, that second and third week of May looks like the best potential of April, sorry, not May. And the Milk River at Nashua, much bigger valley in there. The water can spread out a little bit more, not cause as much damage. So flood stage at Nashua was 20 feet. You can see that they did come up over the weekend and have stayed up a little bit. But as far as looking at prediction for it for the next 3 months, there's only a 15% chance that it'll even hit minor flood stage. So we're really not concerned with the Milk River at Nashua at this point. If you do have any questions, we do encourage you to contact us through our Facebook page or by calling us 406-228-4042. We'd be happy to chat with you about flooding. And this is where you can grab all of these graphics. You can get the current information as well as these probabilistic outlooks that we have been showing you. And they're at water.weather.gov. When you click on the national map, you just click into Northeast Montana, and it'll bring you right here to the Glasgow site, and you can get the latest data. Thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.